A month ago, my dad passed away. It has been really hard for me and my family, more than I can even put into words. We have been going through a lot of emotions, and some days feel heavier than others. Friends, relatives, and people who knew my dad have been reaching out to us, offering their support, sharing their condolences. Their kindness has meant a lot, even though it's still very difficult to cope with the loss. My mom and I have been trying our best to keep moving forward, to take one day at a time and stay strong for each other. My dad left behind a business that he had built from the ground up over many years, and he wanted me to take over and continue what he started. For a long time, he had been teaching me how to run the business, sharing his knowledge and guiding me so that I could carry on his work. Now I'm trying to honor his wishes and his legacy while also learning to manage everything on my own, which is both challenging and emotional. Mentally, I'm prepared to handle this situation, but emotionally, I'm just a wreck. I miss my dad and I wish I could have had more time with him. Last week, out of nowhere, a distant uncle from my dad's side got in touch with me. My dad didn't have much contact with that side of the family at all. Honestly, they were people who mostly asked him for money and seemed to take advantage of him. In the beginning, my dad would usually give in and help them financially. But after he married my mom, she encouraged him to set boundaries and not let them keep taking from him. When my dad finally decided to stop sending money to his relatives, it caused a big argument. They were upset and claimed that it was his duty to take care of them because he was in a better financial position. They insisted that this is what family does. This disagreement created a lot of tension between my dad and them. His family kept demanding more and more financial support from him. However, my parents didn't give in. They stood their ground, refused to back down, no matter how much pressure his family put on them. In the end, my dad's side of the family basically cut him off and stopped including him in their lives. After that, they mostly blamed my mom, saying that she had turned my dad against his own family, because before he married her, he helped them blindly. But my parents didn't let that bother them. They stayed firm in their decision, knowing it was the right choice for their own well-being. Now that my dad has passed away, some members of his family have started reaching out to us. One of them is my distant uncle. Out of the blue, he sent me an email saying that he was shocked and saddened when he heard the news. He mentioned that he felt bad for not being able to attend my dad's funeral. In the email, he also said that he would be coming to our town in a few days for some work-related stuff, and that he would like to meet both me and my mom while he's here. His message felt a little strange because for so long my dad and his family had been distant, and now suddenly he wanted to reconnect. My mom and I assumed that he just wanted to know more about my dad's passing. And we didn't want to turn him away, so we agreed to meet him. We arranged to meet at a restaurant, and it had been a very long time since I last saw this uncle. Probably when I was really, really young. Over the years, he had gotten older, and it was strange to see him after so many years. During dinner, he kept talking about how much I looked like my dad. He also said that he wished he could have met with my dad before he passed so that they could make amends. I felt a little emotional and awkward hearing him express regret for not connecting with my dad earlier, especially after all the history between my dad and that side of the family. At first, our conversation was going smoothly. We talked and caught up, and it seemed like a normal, even pleasant meeting. But then he started asking about our family business. I told him that I was now running it, just as my dad had always wanted me to, and that despite everything going on in our lives, the business was doing well. When I said this, my uncle looked surprised. He then asked me why I was managing the business instead of thinking about selling it now that my dad was no longer around? His question felt unexpected, and I told him firmly that I would never sell the business because it is a family business and I want to continue my dad's legacy. I explained that running it wasn't just about money, it was about honoring everything my dad had built and worked for over the years. My mom also spoke up and said that my dad had been preparing me for this responsibility my whole life. She said she was confident in my ability to handle the business, just as he had wanted. Both of us wanted to make it clear that this was not something we would give up lightly, and that continuing my dad's work was very important to us. My uncle just shook his head and said that he understood how hard this must be for me and my mom. He went on to remark that during this sentimental time, it was sad that I had to focus so much on work. I nodded at him and told him that it was what it was. I explained no matter what, I was okay with carrying on the business. I wanted him to understand that, even though it might seem difficult, it was something I was ready and determined to do. Then my uncle said that since he also had a business, he would be happy for me to reach out to him if I ever needed any advice. He went further and said that now that my father was gone, he would be happy to act as a father figure for me. My mom and I felt a bit uncomfortable hearing that. It was unexpected and didn't feel quite right, given everything that had happened between my dad and his family over the years. Still, I didn't want to be rude or insult him, so I just smiled awkwardly and thanked him. It felt polite on the outside, but inside we were both unsure about what to make of his words. Ever since that dinner, my uncle seems to have extended his stay in our city. He has been visiting us more and more often, and has even come by my office several times. At first I didn't want to seem rude, so I welcomed him politely, but now I'm starting to feel that he's a bit too interfering. He keeps asking to see our company papers and financial details, and he constantly suggests that I make changes in the business, even though in reality, there's no need to change anything. It's beginning to feel overwhelming, and I'm starting to question his intentions. What was once a polite visit is now turning into pressure, and it's making both my mom and me uncomfortable. I don't want to be rude, as he is my dad's family, but AITA if I ask this uncle to back off? Update 1. Guys, I usually consider myself a pretty straightforward person. I'm not the type to let anyone tell me what to do or push me around, but right now I'm going through a really vulnerable time in my life. My emotions are running high. I'm still trying to process everything that's happened with my dad and his family. I just wanted to share this here to make sure that my reaction to my uncle's behavior isn't over the top. I want to know if I'm being reasonable or if maybe I'm letting my emotions take over too much. Since I shared my story, a lot of people have reached out with questions, advice, and support. I wanted to answer some of the most common questions I've received so far. Question: why did you even meet your uncle in the first place? Answer: at first, my mom and I thought he just wanted to know more about my dad's death. We didn't want to be rude, so we agreed to meet him. Question: why was your dad so distant from his side of the family? Answer: my dad's family would often ask him for money. He would help them at first, but after he married my mom, she convinced him to set boundaries. When he stopped sending them money, they argued with him and blamed my mom, saying it was his duty to take care of them. After that, my dad was basically ostracized by his own family. Question: do you think your uncle is genuinely grieving, or is this about money? Answer: I'm not entirely sure. Some of what he says seems like he's trying to be supportive, but his constant interest in our company papers and suggestions for unnecessary changes make me suspicious. It feels like he's more focused on the business than on connecting with us genuinely. Question: did your uncle ever apologize for how the family treated your dad? Answer: not directly. He expresses regret that he didn't get a chance to meet with my dad before he passed, but He doesn't acknowledge the history of conflict or the way the family ostracized him. Question: would your uncle actually be trying to help you? Answer: maybe part of it is genuine, but the way he keeps interfering in the business, checking our financials, suggesting changes, visiting unannounced, makes it hard to trust his motives. Question: why hasn't your mom or you set boundaries yet? Answer: we've been trying to be polite and avoid confrontation at first, but it's becoming clear that boundaries need to be set, or this will start affecting both our peace of mind and the business. Question: isn't it strange that your uncle suddenly wants to be a father figure? Answer: yes, it was very strange. My mom and I were uncomfortable, but I didn't want to insult him, so I just smiled and thanked him. It didn't feel genuine, especially considering the history between him and my dad. Question: how do you feel about his interference in your business now? Answer: at first I welcomed his visits because I didn't want to be rude, but now it's getting too much. He constantly asks to see our company papers, suggests unnecessary changes, and makes both me and my mom uncomfortable. I'm starting to feel pressured and unsure of his true intentions. Question: are you planning to confront him about it? Answer: I haven't done it yet. I'm trying to handle it carefully since he is family, but it's becoming clear that boundaries need to be set or it will start affecting the business and our peace of mind. Question: what do you want to happen with your uncle? Answer: ideally, I want him to respect our space and understand that I'm capable of running the business. I don't want to cut him off completely, but I also can't let him interfere with what my dad built or how we manage it. Question: why don't you just sell the family business if it's easier? Answer: this business is my dad's legacy. He built it from the ground up and had been training me to run it. Selling it would feel like giving up on everything he worked for, and it's something I'm determined to continue. Question: do you think other relatives will start contacting you now too? Answer: it's possible. Now that my dad has passed, some distant relatives have already started reaching out. I'm trying to navigate it carefully and decide who is genuinely supportive versus who is just interested in our business and money. Update 2. Guys, my distant uncle has completely crossed the line now. Today he basically invited himself over to our house for lunch, even though my mom and I had repeatedly tried to tell him that we already had other plans. During lunch, the atmosphere was already tense. My mom and I were trying to enjoy the meal, but there was a lingering discomfort because we hadn't wanted him to come over in the first place. The air felt heavy, and every glance between my mom and me carried a shared sense of unease. My uncle, however, seemed completely oblivious to how awkward the situation was, as if he didn't realize how much he was overstepping. Suddenly, he put down his fork and leaned slightly forward. He said that he would soon have to go back to his hometown, but before he left, he wanted to make his intentions clear. My stomach sank and I felt a wave of apprehension. My mom stiffened beside me, her hands gripping the table as if bracing for something she knew was coming but couldn't stop. Then he started to say that he had come to see me as if I were his own child, and that he wants to be more present in my life. At first it sounded almost sentimental, but the way he said it felt heavy and forced. I looked at him uncomfortably, trying to smile politely while my mind raced, questioning how to respond without sounding rude. My mom's eyes narrowed slightly, a mixture of disbelief and rising concern, and I could feel the tension building in the room like an invisible wall pressing down on all of us. And then he crossed the line entirely. Calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he went on to say that since he was single and had no children of his own, he had been thinking things over. He paused, giving us a long, deliberate look, and then dropped the bomb. He felt it would be perfect for him to marry my mother and adopt me as his child. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. I felt my face tighten, my mouth dry, and my mind scrambling for a way to respond without exploding. My mom's fork froze mid-air, and I could see the shock and disbelief written all over her face. But my uncle didn't stop there. He leaned back slightly, smiling faintly, as if nothing about the situation was odd or inappropriate, and continued talking. He told us that after spending time with me at my company, he felt that I wasn't doing the job right. He claimed that we would be happy to take over the business and manage it more effectively. In that moment, the absurdity, audacity, and sheer disrespect of his words left both me and my mom stunned. I felt my chest tighten and a mix of disbelief and rising frustration surged through me. It was hard to even imagine how he could dismiss all the work my dad and I had put into the business as if it were insufficient, and then offer himself as some sort of savior who could do it better. By now, my mom and I were frozen in a mixture of shock, disbelief, and growing anger. My uncle completely ignored the discomfort he was causing, continued speaking as if everything he was saying was perfectly normal. He went on to suggest that I should sign over the rights to my late father's business to him. According to him, this would not only allow him to manage the company better, but also help him play the role of father in my life more effectively. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. The audacity of someone suggesting that my father's life's work could just be handed over to him. It was almost surreal. My mom's face had turned pale, her hands clenching together under the table as though to physically restrain herself from reacting. I could sense her protective instincts rising, mixed with a quiet fury that was barely contained. Then he went even further. Without missing a beat, he said he would be happy to marry my mother because she was lonely and needed a partner. The words hit like a slap in the face, and for a moment I couldn't even comprehend that someone could say something so inappropriate, so disrespectful, and so blatantly self-serving. I nearly gagged when I heard what he said. The audacity, the sheer creepiness of his words hit me like a physical blow. My mom, who had been holding herself together until now, completely lost her cool. Her face turned red, her eyes narrowed, her entire posture radiated anger. She immediately raised her voice and told him to stop talking. You could feel the tension in the room spike as her words cut through the heavy silence like a whip. She looked furious, the kind of anger that made it clear she wasn't going to tolerate even a second more of his nonsense. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and told my uncle firmly, without a hint of hesitation, that there was no way I would ever sign over the rights to my father's business. Then I added something that had been boiling inside me since the start of this lunch. He needed to stop saying he was my father. I said, with every ounce of conviction I could muster, that I already had a father. Even though my dad had passed away, he would always remain my father. I didn't need this creepy, overstepping man trying to take that place. It was a moment of finally standing up, of putting my dad's memory and my family's boundaries above all else, and letting him know, in no uncertain terms, that what he was doing was completely unacceptable. My uncle looked visibly taken aback, as if he hadn't expected either of us to stand up to him so forcefully. His face shifted from surprise and indignation, and he immediately began to argue, insisting that everything he was saying and doing was for our best. His words dripped with self-importance, as if he alone knew what was right for our lives. But my mom didn't let him finish. She raised her voice, her tone sharp and cutting, filled with righteous anger. She told him in no uncertain terms that he had no right to come into our home and insult us. She reminded him that he was essentially a stranger in our lives, a distant relative who had never been there for us when it mattered. We had only treated him with kindness and politeness, she said, but that did not mean we were interested in having him intrude into our lives or dictate how we should live. Even after my mom's scathing words, my uncle didn't back down. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice rising slightly, trying to argue even more aggressively. He insisted that we needed him more than anything, painting himself as some kind of indispensable figure in our lives. He claimed that our family, now without my dad, was incomplete without him, and that we couldn't possibly manage on our own. Then came the most surreal part. He said he was basically ready to sacrifice his freedom to take care of us. He spoke as if abandoning his own life, choices and personal boundaries would somehow make him a hero, as if his supposed willingness to give everything justified all of the inappropriate things he had been saying. The words made my stomach turn, and I felt a mix of disbelief, horror, and anger all at once. My mom's face turned red with fury, her eyes flashed with disbelief, and her hands tightened into fists on the table. She snapped at him, telling him that no one had asked for his sacrifice, and that his self-proclaimed martyrdom was neither wanted nor needed. I could feel my own hands clench and my jaw tighten, as I realized how far he had gone in trying to insert himself into our lives. My uncle sneered at my mom and said, "You think you can just shut me out? You don't understand what's good for this family. I know what's best for your child and for this business. You and your daughter have been too stubborn, too short-sighted to see it, but I'm here to fix that. You should feel lucky I want to even marry an aged widow like you and give you a second chance." This was the breaking point. My mom stood up suddenly, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief, and with a swift, decisive motion, she slapped him hard across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. Her eyes blazed with anger as she glared at him. "You should feel ashamed," she yelled, her voice trembling with both rage and hurt. "Shame for coming into your dead brother's house, for trying to marry his wife, and for thinking you could take his daughter as if any of this were yours to claim." My uncle stumbled slightly backward, his face red, a mix of anger, humiliation, and disbelief crossing his features. He opened his mouth as if to reply, but the force of my mom's words and action left him momentarily speechless. I could feel my own anger surge alongside my mom's, and after this, I knew it was time to put an absolute end to this nightmare. I looked him straight in the eyes and said firmly, without a hint of hesitation, that if he didn't leave immediately, I would call the police. I told him that this conversation was over, that he had crossed every possible boundary, and that we would not tolerate any more of his interference in our lives. For a moment he seemed stunned, as if he couldn't believe that we were standing up to him so decisively. I could see the hesitation in his eyes, the first sign that perhaps he realized he had gone too far. Eventually he left, muttering something under his breath, but the threat of police action had clearly forced him out the door. The moment the door closed behind him, my mom and I both exhaled a breath we hadn't realized we'd been holding. We immediately blocked him on every platform we could. Phone, email, social media, anything that might give him a way to continue intruding into our lives. How could someone have the audacity to come into their late brother's home, try to assert control over a grieving family, and suggest something so obscene? Even now, I can't quite process his behavior. It was shocking, invasive, and utterly inappropriate. All I want is for the uncle to leave us completely alone. This ordeal has been exhausting. I just hope that we are done with this. Update 3. For anyone worried that my uncle might try to come back or even stalk us, please don't be. Mom and I have made sure our home is secure. We have CCTV cameras installed all around the house. Our 2 dogs are always on alert. They would never let him get anywhere near the property. I've also taken steps to protect the business. I've informed all of my employees that under no circumstances should they entertain or speak with this man. Security has been instructed explicitly never to let him into our offices or company premises. We're taking every precaution to make sure He cannot interfere in our lives again. Also, for anyone concerned about the business, there's no need to worry. The company is already officially in my name, so there's absolutely nothing my uncle can do to take it from me. All of the legal ownership and control rests with me, just as my dad intended. My mom and I have made sure everything is secure, and combined with the precautions we've taken at home and at the office, we are confident that he cannot interfere in our lives or the business in any way. My mom also reached out to my dad's side of the family to let them know exactly what this uncle had said and done. Even though they have never really liked or approved of my mom, they were just as shocked as we were when they heard the full story. Hearing about his audacious and completely inappropriate behavior left them stunned. And for a moment, everyone, including those who had never been close, were united in disbelief over how far he had gone. It was somewhat validating to see that, even from a family that has often been distant or critical. My mom and I were not being unreasonable or overreacting. His words and actions were truly out of line, and having others acknowledge that helped us feel a bit more supported. It also made it clear that his behavior was completely unacceptable, not just to us, but to others who knew him as well. Since that infamous lunch, my uncle hasn't tried to contact us anymore. It's as if he has finally realized that we are serious about our boundaries, or perhaps he's simply too embarrassed to show his face after everything that happened. For our peace of mind and honesty, for his sake too, I hope he has left town. It would be best for everyone if he stayed far away and didn't attempt to interfere in our lives again. Update 4. It's been about a month since my last update, and unfortunately things have taken an even more stressful turn. My uncle is back, and this time he's gone completely legal. He is trying to sue us, claiming that we manipulated my dad into giving the company to me and insisted that my father would have wanted his side of the family to have a share of it. What's even worse is that he has been able to influence some of my other relatives. They've turned against us, insisting that they too deserve a part of the company. It's shocking, deeply frustrating, because my dad spent years building the business. He had explicitly trained me and intended for me to continue his work. Now, instead of grieving and honoring his legacy, we're forced to defend it in the face of false claims and manipulation. Our lawyer has reassured us that my uncle and the relatives don't really have much of a chance to win this case. Legally, everything is solidly in my favor and the company is unquestionably mine, just as my dad intended. But even knowing that, dealing with this situation is still a huge waste of time and energy. The whole situation feels like a nightmare all over again. This time, not just with one outrageous individual, but with relatives who have allowed themselves to be swayed into thinking they have a right to something that my dad never intended to give them. My mom and I are trying to stay strong and deal with this legally, but it's exhausting, stressful, and heartbreaking to have to fight over my father's legacy all over again. Update 5. It's been about 8 months since my last update, and I finally have some really good news to share. After all the stress, false claims, legal battles, we have won the court case. Not only did my uncle lose his case against us, but my mom and I had also filed a counterclaim against him for defamation and mental harassment. The court ruled in our favor and we were awarded $90,000. It's a huge relief to have justice served after everything he put us through. This victory doesn't just mean the money, it's also about validation. It proves that our actions were entirely justified, that my dad's wishes are being respected, and that no one can manipulate or intimidate us into giving up his legacy. It sends a firm and unmistakable message to anyone who might even think about interfering in our lives or our business. Our boundaries are non-negotiable, and we will defend them without hesitation. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.